רצית לעוף, רצית כבר הלאה, עם חצי חיוך, עלית למעלה, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. רצית לעוף, הלכת רחוק מדי בתוך הטרוף, אין מי שישמור עליי, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום. אני רציתי לשיר, אתה הרמת גיטרה, מלאך מנגן לי עכשיו, אז איתך אני שר, מיליון כוכבים בשמיים תופסים את הצבע שלך בעיניים, רציתי לשיר לך, לומר לך שלום. רציתי שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום, תן רק עוד שנייה אחת לומר לך שלום.
May God avenge their blood. I want to emphasize, I wrote an article 2.5 months ago when this war began, and I predicted, and it's not because I'm a genius, but because I was using common sense, I predicted that the longer the war goes on, the more that those who support Israel and support her going in after October 7 are going to turn on Israel and are going to start demanding a ceasefire. And it's only going to get worse, because if Israel does what it has to do, this war will go on. It now is clear, if it wasn't already, well over a year, because Israel is in some great measure at fault for having allowed this to go on the way it did. They developed what's known in Israel as hakonceptia, the conception, the concept that all you have to do is smash Hamas a little bit, set them back 3 years, and let them rebuild, and they'll come back in 3 years and we'll have another war. But we don't want to go through the mess of doing what we're now doing. And on top of it, with all the rubble, we all knew that this is what it's going to look like. It's going to turn into a quote unquote humanitarian crisis, and there's rubble, and look what's happening to tens of thousands of poor, innocent Palestinians. And they're not innocent, they're not poor, they are what they are because they asked for it. They got $4.5 billion by 4 years ago. It's estimated by now it's been $8 billion with a B. With that, they could have built an extraordinary country, and they could have built certainly an electric system and a water system. Instead, they rely on Israel for their electricity and water, and they spent all that money building an underground city of tunnels. And by now, we've all seen the tunnels, and that's where they kept the hostages. And it is terrible that they've been there 100 days plus, and they've created an entire underground city of tunnels. Israel thought they're going to go in and they're going to have 10 tunnels to knock out or 30 tunnels. It's now turned out that the entire city is tunnels. It's inconceivable. It's 400 miles. It's like the New York City subway system. It covers they've got to bomb every single inch of Gaza to get out all those tunnels. Now, the question is, number one, do the people of Israel have the stomach for it? So until October 7, it was hakonceptia. The concept was that the world won't allow it and the people of Israel won't allow it of any government. And the government really, in their defense, was caught between a rock and a hard place. Or if it's the Middle East, it's between Iraq and Iran. They were caught between a rock and a hard place because if they do what they're doing right now, the world won't tolerate it. And frankly, half the country would not tolerate it. The entire left, because they know that from the war of 1982 in Lebanon, when Menachem Begin and Ariel Sharon went to Lebanon. Half the country has barely the patriotism. They're willing to tear the country to pieces. The left half of the country. We saw this when there was a fight over judicial reform, only recently. And it was part of what animated the government of Netanyahu not to want to go full hog. Because once they would, they knew they're going to run into this. So in defense of the Netanyahu government, it took a 9/11 and October 7 for the country itself to unite and for the left to shut up and let's fight a war. It also took, quite frankly, to be attacked in such a way that the left took the bite. And had it instead been that Hamas came across October 7 and gone after the Orthodox, and gone in, they did also, but they couldn't get into the Orthodox, some of the Orthodox kibbutzim because they were locked for Shabbat. But had the massacre gone after the Orthodox, and had it been right-wingers and Orthodox who got massacred, you would not have the same national unity. But what happened was they went to that rave, that all-night drugs. There was a Buddha there. We saw it in the videos, and you couldn't be more left-wing, a bunch of peaceniks. And then they went after kibbutzim that were left-wing. We saw last week, I gave you 7 minutes of that woman still trying to process how they could have done this. After all, I drove those people, she says, to the hospital. I lived near Gaza to be a peace emissary to them, and then they went and they massacred my family. I don't understand it. She can't process it. So that's the other side of it. Now, I want to devote 20 minutes to something so different, but I want to do this. And you know me, and I'm not predictable. It's a problem Denise has to deal with every day. And I want to devote 20 minutes to something extremely positive amid all the craziness. I got curious a week ago. Sometimes I play the Hatikva, and it's sung by the Chief Chazan of Israel. Once in a while, I do the Achenu, the song for the captives, and once in a while, I put up the version that's sung by the Chief Chazan of Israel. And sometimes when I do the song for the military, for the army, for Tzahal, for IDF, it's the chief. I got curious. Who is this guy? Who is the chief? The United States does not have a Chief Chazan. Okay? What army has a Chief Chazan? What does a Chief Chazan do, I was thinking, besides perform for our shul? So I got into it a little, and I'd like to spend 20 minutes for you to understand in the army of the state of Israel something about the Chief Chazan. Here we go. And here we go. Shai Abramson, the Chief Chazan. And so appropriately, I was going to play Achenu anyway. So we'll do the Achenu of the Chief Chazan, and we'll have him do our Hatikva today. By the way, there's no other country in the world. First of all, it's called Magen David Adom. Magen means protector or shield. David The shield of David. Adom is red. The red shield of David. Israel chose not to have a red cross because it's a cross. And they decided to have a Jewish star. And as we know, the Red Cross is anti-Semitic. Jewish captives and hostages are the only ones in the world whom the Red Cross does not visit. And this is going back to the beginning of the Jewish people. The Red Cross has always been anti-Semitic. So Israel has a Magen David Adom, and it's a country that's it needs a sport. So if you go to a shul, somebody donates, everybody wants to see their name on everything. I want my name. How much will it cost to put my name in a siddur prayer book? It'll be $20. Okay, here's $100. Put my name in 5 prayer books. Put my name on. I want to dedicate the children's activity room. It's already dedicated. Where can I put my name? I'll put it in the kitchen. No, it's already dedicated. We already have the Schwartz Goldstein kitchen. Well, what's left? Well, we could put your name. We have 2 toilets we need to dedicate it. Okay, let it be the Fischer toilet. So in the same way, you don't see this on your ambulances in New York, let's say, or California, but this says presented to the people of Israel in honor of Susan Baruch on her 90th birthday. Mazel tov, Susan. By her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Toronto, Canada, 2018. So now she's 95. She should live to 120, and that's how. But you should notice that that's how they do it. That one's Canada. Okay, we continue. And this is the Chief Chazan of Israel.
הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה.
Hatikva, probably the ultimate act of defiance against those that sought to destroy us, the March of the Living. This is Hatikva, I believe, at Auschwitz.
מזרח קדימה, עין לציון צופיה. עוד לא עבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בת שנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Ladies and gentlemen, this
כאן מתוך ניידת טיפול נמרץ קהילתית אני רוצה לאחל לכל צוותי הרפואה של מגן דוד אדום בכל מקום שהם נמצאים, שמצילים חיים שעה שעה, רגע רגע. רוצה לאחל לכם חג שמח, רוצה לאחל לכם הרבה שקט ושלווה, ומזכיר לכולם שהמארג המיוחד הזה של דו-קיום מתקיים בעיקר והכי הרבה, וממשיך להתקיים גם בכוחות ההצלה של מגן דוד אדום ובכוחות ההצלה בכלל. שיהיה לכולנו חג שמח ושקט.
שי, בוא נשאיר משהו.
This is his favorite, the Chazan of Israel. This is his favorite charity. And he volunteers, it turns out, a tremendous amount for the Magen David Adom.
אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה.
אחינו כל בית ישראל,
אחינו
כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה.
המקום ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה ומאפל ליורה ומשעבוד בלי גאולה השתה בגלה ובזמן קריב. שיעבוד לגאולה השתה
את קולו של החזן הצבאי של צהל, שי אברמסון, סגן אלוף שי אברמסון, אתם ודאי זוכרים מהטקסים הממלכתיים הרבים שהוא ליווה, אבל בקטע הבא תשמעו אותו שר בכובע אחר לגמרי, כמתנדב במד"א שפינה קשישה וניסה להקל ולו במעט על הכאב שלה. היא חשבה שהיא קיבלה פרמדיק, אבל זה היה 2 for 1. הנה.
He's a regular volunteer for Magen David Adom, and in this case, an elderly woman all alone was going into an ambulance very concerned. And so as a volunteer, he came in, the Chief Chazan of Israel, to sing to her. And he found out her Hebrew is weak, so he sang to her in Yiddish on the way to the hospital.
שי אברמסון, שלום.
שלום וברכה, עופר.
מה? איך זה מתחיל? מה קורה שם?
תשמע, בין הטקסים הממלכתיים וההופעות וחתונות, רק חזרתי מחתונה מחוץ לארץ, אני משתדל לפנות זמן קצת, גם למשהו ככה לנפש. היה לי חלום ילדות להיות רופא, כנראה בגלגול הזה זה לא יהיה. אז יצאתי לקורס...
אתה פשוט תשאיר למטופלים שלך, אני לא בטוח שזה מה שהם צריכים בחדר הלם.
זה בא על הדרך. מגן דוד אדום, הצטרפתי אליהם, אני נמצא עכשיו כרגע בקורס נהגי אמבולנס, אולי גם בהמשך קורס פרמדיקים, אני מכוון גבוה.
ואז אתה מפנה את האישה המקסימה הזו, אישה מבוגרת.
האישה המקסימה הזו פיניתי, ובאיזו פרוצדורה שעשיתי לפני כן, והרגשתי צורך לגעת בה, לתת לה קצת מזור מעבר לטיפול הרפואי שאנחנו נותנים במגן דוד אדום, והיא דוברת רוסית. אז התחלתי לשיר ביידיש,
ביידיש היא מבינה.
והאישה שהיא מעט דימנטית, אורו עיניה. וזה היה כל כך מרגש, גם אותי וגם את הצוות העתן שהייתי בו, גם צילמו מיד, וזה קטע מרגש שככה נשאר כמזכרת. אני חייב להגיד שאני מגיע לתוך האירועים האלה, אנחנו במסכות כמובן, אבל אנשים פה ושם מזהים. ואז מתחיל להיות איזשהו שיח.
אז הם לא בטוחים אם הם סבלו מכאב בטן, או שיש איזה רגע של בלבול גם, כחלק מתופעות הלוואי שהם סובלים מהם, והמשפחה יוצרת איתך קשר אחרי זה, כי הסרטון הזה עף ברשתות החברתיות, ריגשת, באמת ריגשת.
ראיתי שלא ציפיתי, אנחנו מדי פעם ככה במגן דוד אדום מנסים לחזור חזרה לבית החולים ולראות מה מצבו של המטופל שטיפלנו בו, אבל זה לא משהו שקורה כל הזמן. במקרה בדרך פה לאולפן קיבלתי טלפון מחברה של הנכדה של הגברת הנחמדה הנפלאה הזאת, שאמרה לי שהם נורא התרגשו בכלל בכל הקהילה הרוסית, כי המשפחה של ככה דוברי רוסית, היה להם מאוד מרגש.
בוא נשמע עוד פעם את הצילים, אותך, בזמן נסיעה, פינוי לבית חולים, שר? נהדר. שי אברמסון, נראה אותך מעת לעת, נקווה שלא באמבולנס, רק בטקסים הרשמיים.
שנזכה להציל חיים.
אמן, אמן. תודה, שי. תודה שהגעת אלינו.
תודה רבה.
את קולו של החזן הצבאי של צהל, שי אברמסון, סגן אלוף שי אברמסון, אתם ודאי זוכרים מהטקסים הממלכתיים הרבים שהוא ליווה, אבל בקטע הבא תשמעו אותו שר בכובע אחר לגמרי, כמתנדב במד"א שפינה. תודה שהגעת אלינו.
תודה רבה.
And then you have him singing with his choir. They practice, and now they're singing Adon Olam.
Adon Olam, Asher Malach, Beter Kol Yetzir Nivra, Le'et Nasa, Bechefzo Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, Adon Olam, Asher Malach, Beter Kol Yetzir Nivra, Le'et Nasa, Bechefzo Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, ואחרי יכלות הכל לבדו, והוא היה בעת שני להמשיל לו בירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ללא העוז והמשרה אדון עולם אשר מעלה בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי שמו נקרא והוא כלי וחי גואלי וצורכי צרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי בנת כוסי ביום אקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא בידו הפקילוכי ותשע
Wouldn't it be cool to be eating in a sukkah if you were his next door neighbor during Sukkot? Well, this guy is big singing Zmirot or something like that. We're just being the FedEx guy that drops off a package or the equivalent in Israel. So that's him working, and he's multifaceted. What I learned is that he also performs in the English language, and he's a multifaceted guy.
When you're weary and feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. Oh, when times get rough and friends just can't be found, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down. When you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I'll take your path. Oh, when darkness comes and pain is all
Cantor Shai Abramson.
And then sometimes he has to perform at places like Yad Vashem to recite the Kel Malei Rachamim memorial prayer for the deceased. Here, of course, in a Holocaust memorial, while being visited by a president of the United States.
Abramson will now recite El Malei Rachamim, a prayer for the souls of the martyrs.
אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים דיין אלמנות ואבי יתומים המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמות 6 מיליונים אחינו ואחיותינו רבבות רבבות אלפי ישראל אנשים נשים וטף שנהרגו שנשחטו שנשרפו שנחנקו שנקברו חיים ושהומתו בכל מיני מיתות משונות ואכזריות בידי הגרמנים הנאצים ויוזריהם ושהלכו לעולמם על קידוש השם בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם לכם.
And so these are different roles that he plays. And so he's multifaceted. So that's what I've learned about the Chief Chazan of Israel. And then, of course, he does
בהקדשה ממני אלייך.
Probably, he says the happiest of all his roles is he's called on to do weddings or when members of the armed forces are getting married while in service.
השיר אשת חיל, מפי החזן הראשי לצה"ל, שי אברמסון. אוהב אותך, שלך, ואיתך לנצח נצחים.
אשת חיים במצע ורחוק מפנינים מיכל בטח בלב בעלה ושאלה לא יחסר אשת חיל במצע ורחוק מפנינים מיכל
בטח בליל בעלה ושנה ללא יחסה שקר החן והבל היופי והבל היופי אישה יראת השם היא תתעלה שקר החן והבל היופי והבל היופי אישה יראת השם היא תתעלה.
And here's one more wedding clip as well.
ברוך אתה של אלוקינו מלך העולם אשר ברא ששון לשמחה חתן וכלה גילה לרינה תצהר וקדמה עוד יישמע בהרי יהודה ובחוצות ירושלים כל ששון לכל שמחה כל חתן וכל כלה בואי נשאלו עטרת בעלה בואי כלה אשר ברא ששון לשמחה חתן וכלה.
I actually hate to stop it. And finally, just this was with all the negative news that comes out and the criticism. I wanted so much to begin today after 10 or 11 of these programs to really highlight what makes Israel unique. To have a Chief Chazan who does that, whose dream was to be a doctor, and if that didn't work out, he decides that he's taking a course to drive an ambulance, and his aspiration someday is to be a paramedic with Magen David Adom, and in the meantime volunteers to sing to people in the ambulances. And he's so multifaceted that he'll be singing Hatikva at Auschwitz or Kel Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer at Yad Vashem, or weddings for members of the armed forces. And then, of course, you would expect that any chazan of the Israeli army would be able to do Kol Nidre, and this is just a little snip of that. Likewise, we saw him working with his choir in the informal setting of a kitchen, basically singing Adon Olam. And this is part of Israel. There's so much positive, and people gravitate to negative news. You open a newspaper, or no one does that anymore, but you turn on the news, and it's they gravitate towards negative. That's what it is. I wanted to share this. These are the choir that were sitting around that table singing Adon Olam. So I wanted to share that. Shai Abramson.
The longer...
Now, let's go to another kind of... We move on.
The longer this war goes on, it seems like Netanyahu is growing weaker in the eyes of the Israeli public, at least according...
So here you've got an interview, Jake Tapper of CNN, with Naftali Bennett, who was recently prime minister briefly of the state of Israel in between Netanyahu terms.
According to polls, do you think he's going to continue to get weaker and weaker?
I don't want to comment on domestic...
The sound is a little softer on this.
Attack the prime minister on foreign press. We're all focused on winning the war.
I want to ask you about Israeli strikes on Gaza, because ultimately this pause in hostilities is going to end, and Israel is going to continue to try to destroy Hamas. One thing I continue to hear from Israeli supporters in the U.S. government, whether it's the Biden administration or Congress, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, I keep hearing that the IDF needs to be much more careful when it comes to Palestinian civilians in Gaza, that the IDF needs to use more precision munitions, that the IDF needs to take fewer risks. Even if the conservative estimates are right, with 15,000 killed, even if 5,000 of them are Hamas, that's still a 2-to-1 ratio of civilians to Hamas. That's a lot of civilians who have been killed. Is Netanyahu going to continue to ignore President Biden on this issue of civilian casualties?
By the way, Jake Tapper is wrong. The actual numbers are 1.5 civilians killed for every terrorist who's been killed. And the tallies in other wars like World War II were 9 civilians killed for every targeted enemy. Israel has actually at 1.5 to 2 civilians killed for every targeted terrorist. It's actually the lowest amount, the lowest proportion in the history of recorded war. No one's telling you that.
Well, Jake, we're not magicians. There's no magic way to dramatically reduce collateral damage when Hamas's deliberate goal, intentional goal, is to increase Gaza casualties in order for you to ask me that precise question. You see, Hamas wants to stop the war in a cynical way by it effectively killing its own people by placing them in harm's way. If there were some magical solution where we could tweezer people out and just hit the rocket launcher that's shooting rockets at Israelis, we would do it. We do try to reduce unnecessary civilian casualties, but the reality is that there's no magic. The current ratio is lower than what it was at the beginning and low in international standards. From World War II through Iraq and Afghanistan, you'll see that Israel has one of the lowest ratios.
What do you think is going to happen in Gaza after the war is over? What will Gaza look like? And who is going to take over? Who is going to keep order?
Well, I'll tell you what I think we ought to do. The first thing is to fully disarm Gaza and ensure that it's there's no more arms, no more explosives there after we dismantle and eliminate Hamas. I mean, the first thing is to kill the Hamas leadership and the terrorists, then clean up Gaza from weapons and explosives so something like this can never happen again. The third thing I would do is create a buffer zone into Gaza of about 1.5 kilometers deep, which would become a no man's land between Gaza and Israel, again, so this sort of thing could not happen. And Israel would retain overall security and defense responsibility, but we don't want to govern the Gazans. So what I think we would do is create an interim technocratic self-government that would say for about 5 years govern Gaza, denazify Gaza, which means clean out all the incitement, all the education that all Jews are pigs and devils. And after 5 years, we would revisit and figure out how to create a sustainable government, perhaps with our Abraham Accord partners, countries in that area.
Well, what do you mean by denazi? I mean, no free speech? People can't say nasty things about Jews? Get rid of them? How?
No, free speech doesn't allow for educating and poisoning the minds and hearts of
okay, so you mean like in the education? You mean in the education system?
Yes,
get rid of that.
The education system and the media. We cannot. Here's what we learned. One of the lessons learned is that when people are incited with propaganda from the moment they're born till they're 20 years old that all Jews are pigs and devils and need to be slaughtered, well, they go out and slaughter Jews. And if it's something that we used to sort of procrastinate on or not take care of, we can't ignore it anymore.
But don't you think the last 6 weeks have done a lot to incite and inspire a whole new generation of terrorists? I mean, all the civilian deaths. I mean, don't you worry that in itself is going to raise and inspire a whole new generation of Palestinians who hate Israelis?
It depends what we do next. I want to remind you that in Nazi Germany, in the final months of the war, there were many civilian casualties, yet Germany was denazified in the war, and we had in Germany. So obviously, as I said, we don't have a goal of killing civilians. We have a goal of reducing the number of dead civilians. But look, if anyone has a magic plan how to eradicate Hamas without any collateral damage, bring it on and we'll adopt it. Barring that, we're going to have to get the job done and then denazify Gaza.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jake.
As well. Can I ask you about what a debate that's going on in the International Criminal Court, though, the International Court of Justice in The Hague? They're seeing a case being brought the first day today by South Africa, of all countries. You probably have, I mean, just been in South Africa at Christmas, lovely country, but they maybe have their own problems they need to look at before they worry about anywhere else. But they are claiming that Israel is guilty of genocide in Gaza. Now, you've been out in the Middle East, you're currently in the West Bank, you've been into Gaza with the Israeli Defense Forces. You weren't able to roam freely as an independent reporter yourself. But do you think that those claims of genocide, do you think they have any foundation?
Well, first of all, absolutely not. I mean, as I've mentioned to you before, Julia, I mean, the population of the Gaza has grown by almost 1 million in the last 16 years. So it's a very strange type of genocide where the population actually increases. You mentioned, of course, this preposterous action by the South African government. If you go to South Africa, as I have been, you'll find that, I mean, the South African South Africa is one of the most beautiful and amazing countries in the world, and it's one of the most hideously run. Major cities like Johannesburg have massive electricity blackouts. There's horrible corruption by the government. They can't provide the most basic things for the people, and terrible violence and much more, and horrible poverty in the townships. South Africa, however, is its government is profoundly anti-Semitic, has been anti-Israel for years, and they always do this sort of thing to try to sort of distract attention among their own population from the failings of their own government. It's very telling, by the way, Julia, that one of the people who's joined this initiative of the South Africans to try to take Israel to The Hague for a non-existent war crime. One of the people who's joined that effort is Jeremy Corbyn, of course. And you mentioned, Julia, that I've been in Gaza quite a bit recently. I have, and it's true I've been in with the IDF. And I haven't been allowed to roam around freely. I've been allowed to roam around quite a bit. But one reason why you can't roam around very freely in the Gaza, certainly not if you're a Western journalist, is because of Hamas. Hamas, of course, has spent years killing and torturing any Palestinian journalist who doesn't support them. They're not very keen on most Western journalists unless they happen to be saying exactly what Hamas wants them to say. And even so, it's not a great situation. So, no, roaming freely in the Gaza isn't a great idea at the moment, not least because Hamas keep on popping up from tunnels and taking shots at everyone. Yeah. But the idea that the South Africans and others are trying to make these monstrous claims against the Israelis is really quite something. Israel is fighting a very, very tough battle in Gaza. Because, as I reported in the New York Post last week, every second house in the Gaza has munitions found in it. Every mosque that the IDF goes into has munitions in it. Every UN school that they go into has munitions in it, and entrances to tunnels. And one soldier I spoke to on the record just last week, who does a lot of this house-to-house work and has been in there for months doing this, said to me, at this stage, when they go into a house and they try to find out where the entrance to the tunnel is in a house or where the munitions in the house are being stored, they go straight to the children's room because that's where the weapons are kept. He described how they turn over the children's beds, and that's where you find the entrances to Hamas's terror tunnel networks. That's where you find the munitions. Just last week, he said he turned over the cot in one bedroom, a children's bedroom in the Gaza. He turned over the cot, and of course there underneath it was a rocket-propelled grenade that Hamas had stored there. So it's an incredibly difficult battle that's going on. There's a massive civilian population who are caught up in it, but I think everyone has to realize, among other things, that this civilian population was handed the Gaza in 2005 by the Israelis, who took every single Jew out of Gaza. They forced them out of their homes. Hamas was Gaza rather, but Palestinians were effectively given a state in Gaza. There were no Jews, no Israelis, and what did they do with it from 2005 onwards? The population voted in Hamas, which then did a coup against Fatah, which killed their fellow Palestinians, and so they've had 18 years to run a state. And this is what we have, Julia. All the people who talk about the two-state solution and all this sort of thing should remember there was a state given to the Palestinians in 2005, and all that the world got, all that we taxpayers in the West got, was a terror state, which has spent the last 18 years committing terrorism against the state of Israel. As I said to you before, Julia, we in Britain couldn't live with that situation as a neighbor. The Israelis can't. For the sake of the Palestinians and the Israelis, I think everyone should want to see the end of Hamas. But, there are still people like Jeremy Corbyn who think that they're their friends. So,
everyone with the right thinking would agree on that final point, certainly. Douglas Murray, great to talk to you there live for us from the West. That's a relief to hear that.
If Jordan cared at all for the Palestinian people, they would take them in.
All right,
they would take them in.
They
don't want them. If the Egyptians wanted them, they'd take them in, but they don't. Do you know why? Because every country that takes in the Palestinians gets terror. It happened in Egypt, it happened in Jordan, it happened in Syria, it happened in Lebanon, it happened in Tunisia, on and on. That's why these people don't really care about their fellow Muslims. They just care about hating Jews.
All right.
This was a little bit of a heartening moment, one of these crazy British moments where a group decides to set up an anti-Israel, free Palestine thing, and in a rare situation caught on camera, the British police actually did their job.
No. Free Palestine! No, stop it. Yes.
Right, because all the tourists, they just want to look at this guy whom they were met. I mean, I'm just thinking about that guy having to sit 10, 12 hours a day on a horse. And that's what everybody's taking pictures of. And they won't tolerate any Palestine garbage in front of that guy. And that's how they do it in England. And now I'm going to show you how they do it in Texas.
Tu peux coucher, mais pas tellement pour lui. Non, tu peux.
Here they're dealing with a Palestine disruptor at a Greg Abbott event. Greg, for those of you that don't know, Greg Abbott is the governor of Texas. He was speaking. Someone got up and started yelling, "Free Palestine," but he forgot he wasn't in England. He was in Texas. And that's the difference between London, Brooklyn, and Texas. Now, there's talk about whether Haredim, the so-called black hat Orthodox community, participate in fighting and Tzahal in the Israeli army. And there have been a record number of enlistments among Haredim in light of what happened on October 7. And we're beginning to see more and more participation, which was unimaginable 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And it's a progress that's starting to happen of Haredim getting involved in the Israeli army. And this is a unit of Haredim singing Ani Maamin.
מדהימה של הציבור החרדי במלחמה הזו. אנחנו רואים אותה תמיד, אבל במלחמה הזו ראינו שגם הם החליטו לעלות על מדים ולהתגייס כדי להגן עלינו ועל כל עם ישראל. אני רוצה שנראה רגע קטן מסיום הטירונות של אחת המחלקות, ברגע מרגש במיוחד. בואו נראה.
אני שומע אותך, כן.
טוב, תשמע, זה קטע ששרים שיר כזה בצה"ל. פעם זה...
From time to time, I've shown you film primarily of the ground forces of the Army and the Air Force. And I just wanted to take about a minute of this 4 minutes to highlight the unsung other heroes, those of the Israeli Navy, the Tzahal Hayam. As I've said in one of the previous programs and more, you know, Israel is on the coast. After all, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, or all of Israel will be free. It's on the Mediterranean Sea, and so is Gaza. They could have built, as everyone talks about, a beautiful, beautiful country with amazing amount of sea coast and everything like that. But they use the sea. They try to get on these little swift boats, as were used in Vietnam, and they try to get up the Mediterranean so they could attack Jews from the shoreline, and they try to bring in weapons, and they try to use the sea. And the Israeli Navy, the Tzahal Hayam, is there to protect the sea and also to destroy any buildings where they try to store weapons or hide. They're shooting at swift boats, Sira, Mihira, swift boats. Depth charges. Definitely important to take Dramamine before you go out. So I wanted very much to share that little snippet. For all those heroes, we don't really appreciate. It's an important part of the overall. And that's the song of the prayer for the armed forces. B'yabasha ba'avir, b'yabasha, on dry land, ba'avir, in the air, uvayam, and on the sea. And this, I'm going to just show the first 3 minutes of this 9 minutes.
הולך פה ככה, אתה מרגיש בטוח?
כן, עכשיו בטוח.
אין צלפים?
אם היה, אז נהרוג אותם.
תגיד לי, שאתה רואה ככה את עזה עולה באש, מה אתה מרגיש?
Okay, when you're going out, what are you feeling?
מה אני מרגיש?
What do I feel?
אחד, אני מרגיש סוף סוף, אנחנו...
First of all, what I feel is that ultimately we are killing Hamas.
אנחנו מחסלים את החמאס. כאן קודקוד, מאיפה אתה מגיע? הם רצחו לנו את המשפחות.
Look, they murdered our families,
את הנשים, את
our women, our children.
הילדים, וברור לנו שכל מי שנמצא...
And it's absolutely clear to us that everybody we encounter is an enemy.
נמצא פה הוא אויב. כולם כאן הם אויב.
Everybody here in Gaza are our enemies. Don't kid yourself.
אין פה בית שאין פה ציוד לחימה.
There's not a single house that we encounter where there are not military supplies. There's not a single courtyard or backyard or front yard that doesn't have rockets.
אין פה חצר שאין בה רקטות.
תגיד לי, אבל זה ריאלי לעבור פה בית בתוך כל האין...
So the reporter says, but come on, tell me, I mean, you're going to go house to house to house. I mean, it's like going to go forever.
מה זה ריאלי? אנחנו עושים את
Be real. So the soldier says, what do you mean, be real? We're doing this.
זה. שאלת אותי למה בטוח?
I mean, what do you expect?
אין פה בית שלא חתם.
There is not a single house that we haven't had to seal off.
אבל זה ייקח שנים.
Reporter says, but this is going to take years. The soldier responds, so it'll take years.
שיקח שנים.
So it'll take years. And they've written on that wall near Oz, the name of one of the kibbutzim, Kom Yakum, we're going to avenge. Nekama, we're going to avenge.
Well, back on our Sunset, that was Professor Norman.
Norman Finkelstein, there is a sickness among Jews. It's a real sickness. It's a disease. It's a mental illness. I don't think any other people but Jews have this mental illness. Look, Jews have a predisposition, a greater predisposition to Tay-Sachs, right? As opposed to non-Jews, right? Jews have that. So Jews also have, not, does every Jew have Tay-Sachs? No, very, very few. Very many couples actually test before they get married to make sure they're both not carrying a recessive gene. More couples before they marry should test for the recessive gene of Jewish self-hate. We have a very unique gene that if two people marry and they both have that recessive gene, they create a George Soros or a Bernie Sanders or a Ben and Jerry. This kind of disgusting self-loathing where there's a perception that from childhood maybe, I have to show the non-Jews that I hate Jews just as they do. I question Jews just as they do. I'm suspicious of Jews. So therefore, let me marry into your people. Let me have a job in your business because I'm no more Jewish than anyone else. I just have a last name of Finkelstein. This guy, Norman Finkelstein, is a professor who's devoted his entire research career to arguing that the Holocaust wasn't such a Holocaust and that anti-Semitism isn't such anti-Semitism, and it's all exaggerated. And it's used by Israel, this fake Holocaust, is a Jew whose parents were killed in the Holocaust, that the Jews used the Holocaust in order to justify mass murder of non-Jews, such as what Israel's doing to the poor, innocent Gaza civilians. As I've said a billion times, and as we've been hearing on these programs, the civilians in Gaza are not innocent at all. Not at all. There may not be a single How could that be? Rabbi, how can you say 2 million people is not one good one? Now you understand why the Torah said certain nations have to be wiped out. I'm not saying, just for the record, I'm not saying that Israel should go and wipe out every Gazan they meet. I'm not calling for ethnic cleansing. You just can't do that. You cannot do that. But that's why the Torah, for people who have a question before October 7, Rabbi, I'm Orthodox, I learned the Torah, I keep Shabbos, I keep kosher. I'm a little bit troubled by the morality, Rabbi, of exterminating Amalek, wiping out all of Amalek. How can that be? Even their children, Rabbi. After October 7 and Gaza, you begin to understand the morality. Don't think that Western morality is more moral than a morality that says a people who completely have been raised and have completely been mind controlled to destroy and to want to destroy. Don't think it's immoral to wipe them all out. And people understand that. They don't need a rabbi to explain it. During World War II, the United States did not hesitate to bomb the heck out of Germany and wipe out the people of Dresden. And the Americans, Harry Truman, he was told what it will mean if you drop an atomic bomb on Nagasaki or Hiroshima. And he said, and how many Americans will die if I don't? oh, in order to get the Japanese are not going to surrender. These Japs, that's what they were called in those days. These Japs, they're not going to surrender. For the emperor, they're going to fight to the last man. They're going to take hundreds of thousands of Americans until they finally have no choice. There's none of them left. And Truman said, then drop the bomb. We dropped the bomb. Now will you surrender? Oh, we don't surrender. We don't surrender. You could drop atomic bomb. He dropped another atomic bomb. Are you ready to surrender? We don't. Well, do you have any more? Yeah, I got another one coming. Okay, we surrender. And it was a very, very famous game of chicken because he didn't have another one. He didn't have another one, but they thought he did. It's important to understand what the people of Gaza have become in terms of what's going on. You don't hear it in the news. That's why we do the Sunday programs, to educate. So Norman Finkelstein has been going all around the place. He's a guest speaker everywhere, talking about how Israel's committing genocide. And our friend Pierce Morgan wanted to do a debate of Norman Finkelstein and Douglas Murray, which would have been a fun debate. And Murray wouldn't go on.
Finkelstein listened to all that with Douglas Murray. Douglas, your response to that interview?
Several things. I've followed the career of Norman Finkelstein for many years. He's notorious for having destroyed his career by, among other things, weaponizing his parents being in the Holocaust to use his career to attack Israel in particular. I think all societies produce a type of sociopath and psychopath, and I do think that Norman Finkelstein is just such a person. If I could give just one example. He repeatedly in that interview referred to Gaza as a concentration camp. Gaza is no such thing as a concentration camp, and Norman Finkelstein knows that very, very well. Every single Jew was removed from Gaza forcibly in 2005 by the Israeli government. In 2006, the people of Gaza had an election and they elected Hamas. Hamas proceeded to kill Fatah and other Palestinians who did not agree with Hamas. And if anyone is responsible for making Gaza into a prison camp, it is Hamas that uses places like the Shifa hospital as torture chambers for Palestinians. Now, here's another oddity about it. He kept saying concentration camp about Gaza. Do you, peers, know anybody who got out of a concentration camp in 1945 and proceeded to go next door and behead and rape everyone they could find? I don't. But only Norman Finkelstein finds these kinds of comparisons to make, and makes them willfully. And by the way, and shame on him for this, what we just heard was Holocaust denial in real time. He pretends we don't know what happened on the 7th of October. We do know. We do know. And if he doesn't believe the reports he reads, and if he doesn't believe all of the international media, he should have come with me this morning to the pathology department here in Tel Aviv, where they are still trying to work out who the bodies are that are arriving. I was standing this morning in Tel Aviv in the mortuary with the doctors who are trying to work out the identities still of the people killed that day. There is so little of some of them, peers, that they can't even extract DNA from them. There is so little of them that sometimes it turns out what was thought to be the charred remains of one person is the remains of two people. People arrive in bags, peers. They arrive in bags with little bits of what is left of their body and maybe a bit of a mobile phone. There was the skull of what I said that must be a child's skull. And one of the experts there in the mortuary said, actually, we don't know, because the fire in the house that Hamas lit was so intense in its heat, it could have been a young man's skull that was warped into a smaller size by the heat. So if Norman Finkelstein, practicing his Holocaust denialism in real time, actually wants to practice any of the academic pursuit he has spent his career not pursuing, then I would urge him to go like I did, and see the body bags in the mortuary here, and see what Hamas did that day. It is disgusting that Norman Finkelstein uses his late parents to defame Israel, to pretend that Israel are the Nazis in this situation. All societies produce sick individuals, but very few people have been produced who are quite as sick as Norman Finkelstein.
Would you ever debate with him?
I said to you, I refuse, and I refuse for one straightforward reason, is that I know a very, very few people I would say I don't debate with, but Norman Finkelstein is one of them. Most people I know in academia stopped having anything to do with him many decades ago, when he wrote his book, The Holocaust Industry, in 2000, claiming that the Jews were using the Holocaust to sort of make money from and so on. Most people wanted to be nowhere near such a fetid individual. I don't think he's somebody you can debate with, because I do not want to debate with a Holocaust denier in real time any more than I would debate with a Holocaust denier who was denying the last Holocaust. This was the biggest murder of Jews since the Holocaust, and shame on Norman Finkelstein for trying to pretend that that didn't happen or happened differently in real time. It's disgusting.
Douglas, as always, thank you very much indeed for your powerful contribution tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
Away on BBC.
As we wind down, because I said we're going to not be as long in our programs, there's so much I had to edit out and cut out last night in order to not go into the longer times, but we'll close out with this. BBC, we in the United States have our own media liars, but the BBC is really just something else, British broadcasting. And the only thing is that every third day they put out an anti-Israel thing, and then every third day they retract it. And it turns out that there's so many facts, and all over the world they come under attack, so then they have to back down.
.com.uk on their help and feedback link, not exactly the front page, is an apology that reads in part, "We ran a story about Hamas accusing the Israeli army of carrying out summary executions in the Gaza Strip. This was a Hamas statement. We had not made sufficient effort to seek corroborating evidence to justify reporting the Hamas claim. We apologize for this mistake." The problem is, this apology, which is basically hidden on their website, only came out this week. But the story itself that they're apologizing for, that Israel was summarily executing civilians, ran on Christmas Eve. That means it was out there for their millions of readers to read and tweet and send out on social media, and most importantly, believe for more than 2 weeks. I guess the BBC came to the enlightened realization that maybe Hamas is not the most trustworthy source. Which brings me back to this part of the apology, quote, "This was a Hamas statement." So the prestigious British Broadcasting Corporation is taking the word of Hamas, an organization officially recognized by the UK and many others as a terror group, running with it as fact. But the bigger issue is that no one should be surprised, because this is the same news agency that in the aftermath of the October 7th massacre, which included the rapes of women, burning of babies, defended their decision not to refer to Hamas as terrorists, rather only as militants, a policy they eventually changed, but only after mass criticism. And remember that back in October, this is how they covered that massive explosion at Al-Hali Hospital in Gaza, which turned out to have been an errant missile fired by Islamic Jihad.
The Israeli military has been contacted for comment, and they have said that they are investigating. But, you know, it is hard to see what else this could be, really, given the size of the explosion, other than an Israeli airstrike or several airstrikes.
Yeah. A few days later, BBC said this: "We accept that even in this fast-moving situation, it was wrong to speculate in this way. That doesn't represent the entirety of the BBC's output." But it actually is the entirety of the BBC's output that's the problem. Less than a month after that, on November 15th, BBC apologizes for misreporting that the IDF targeted medical staff.
BBC News, as it covered initial reports that Israeli forces has entered Gaza's main hospital. We said that medical teams and Arab speakers were being targeted. This was incorrect and misquoted a Reuters report. We should have said IDF forces included medical teams and Arabic speakers for this operation. So we apologize for this error.
I mean, you said Israel was aiming to kill medics and Arab speakers, when the truth was that Israeli forces included medics and Arab speakers, presumably to help with wounded Gazans? Just no big deal. Makes three major mistakes by the BBC, which all made the assumption that Israel was guilty of something horrible in some way, shape, or form that turned out to be conclusively or likely false. We reached out to the BBC, invited them on. They declined the invitation, saying nobody was available. That is what they have told us in the past as well. When we invited them, you would think a television news network might have someone available to do television news when they are the subject. We're joined by someone whose journalistic
שברך אבותינו אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את חיילי צבא הגנה לישראל. הוא יברך את חיילי צבא הגנה
ייתן אדוני את אויבינו הקמים עלינו ניגפים לפניהם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו מכל צרה וצוקה, מכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם. ידבר שונאינו תחתיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה ובעטרת ניצחון, ויקוים בהם הכתוב.
כי
I want to thank everybody for being here today and for being part of this program. As always, our goal is to inspire, to give you the news that's going on, and to give you the strength that you can go out and defend Israel when you encounter people and just in your own home and your own community, and be strong. And this is going to go on for a long time, and let's be strong for a long time. Thanks very much for being here and have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.